Knowing about certain things that I don't think get talked about a lot can help you to age better. Knowledge is power, right? I think knowing about uric acid might help you put more years lived in good health in your future. You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 165. Knowing about uric acid helps you age better. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode. So happy that you're here today. Have you changed your mind about anything lately? Do you find the value in hearing what other people have changed their minds about and why? I think it's useful to hear what people think now compared to what they used to think and what new evidence has come to light for them to make them see things differently now. I think we should always be changing and iterating and up-leveling. Today, we're going to talk about why you should care about uric acid. So let's start with a little story about evolution. I heard this from Rick Johnson, MD, and I'll put a link in the show notes to his article in Scientific American that explains this in more detail if you're super interested. So, about 22 million years ago, proconsul primates, who are apes from which Homo sapiens eventually evolved, were living their best lives in Africa. They ate lots of fruit and pounded the glass with their fists to scare annoying little kids. Just kidding. But have you ever seen the gorillas or chimpanzees do that at the zoo? It makes me so sad for them. Anyway, our ancestor apes ate lots of fruit and stayed happy, healthy, and lean. Then, after 5 million years of doing that, global cooling created a land bridge that allowed many apes to finally realize their bucket list dream of traveling to Europe. So they did. After a few million years on vacation in Europe, further global cooling made it so fresh, ripe fruit was no longer available year-round. Lots of them starved to death, which is not what you want to have happen on your European vacation. A small subset of them, however, over these few million years, developed a mutation in the metabolism of uric acid that gave them a superpower. The power to stay alive without fresh fruit available for a period of time every winter. The mutation in uric acid metabolism allowed them to get really good at turning fructose into body fat. Fructose is a form of sugar found naturally in fruit. We talked all about it in episode 119, so that one goes well with this episode if you just decide that you want to know more about fructose. The apes started making a boatload of uric acid, but were able to stay alive by storing the energy from the fruit they ate in the summer and fall to use during winter. Eventually, a few of the apes from Europe returned home to Africa, and then many millions of years later evolved into Homo sapiens. So why does this matter? Because this discovery, which was just made in 2015, explains why humans have a very rare trait of altered uric acid metabolism that causes us to have quite high levels of uric acid compared to almost any other animal. If you've never heard of uric acid before, that's totally fine. If you have, you've probably heard of it in relation to the diagnosis of the disease gout. We're not going to talk about gout today, but just really quickly, gout is a form of arthritis, usually in the big toe, but sometimes also in the ankle or knee. It's extremely painful, and it used to be called the disease of prosperity because it would be kings and noblemen in the Middle Ages and Renaissance time periods who would get it. It's caused by excess uric acid in the blood, causing sharp uric acid crystals to form in the joints. It always used to be taught that it was caused by eating too much meat, possibly with excess alcohol. That's what I learned in pharmacy school. It's pretty much a human-only disease, although I found a report of 2 dogs and 1 cat in all of history who have been assayed to have high uric acid in their joints. We didn't know till 2015 that it's only a human disease because we evolved from these apes that developed a mutation in uric acid metabolism so that they could not die when there wasn't fruit on the trees in the winter. There are some kinds of kidney stones that are also caused by uric acid crystals. So I said we're not here to talk about gout today, but cases of gout have more than doubled over the last 20 years. Why? Are we eating more than twice as much meat? A quick Google search told me that from 2000 to 2019, meat consumption increased by 0.34 kilograms per person per year. So is that why? I don't think so. Things that raise your uric acid levels are genetics. Some people, even those who live very healthy lifestyles, just have a natural tendency toward higher uric acid levels. Purine-rich foods like meat, brewer's yeast like in beer, and our old friend, fructose. Remember from episode 119 that fructose is a sugar found naturally in fruit? It's sweeter than glucose, which is the sugar our body is built to run on. Sucrose, which is table sugar, is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. High fructose corn syrup is 55% fructose and 45% glucose. Dextrose is another name for glucose. Okay, so you got all that. Dextrose, glucose, fructose, sucrose. You know all about the sugars now. Glucose is dextrose and what our body uses for fuel. Sucrose is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. When glucose is metabolized by our body, it generates energy. When fructose is metabolized by our body, it generates uric acid. For how much fructose and glucose come together as a package deal, because that's the literal definition of sucrose, and how chemically similar they are and how similar they taste, it's crazy how differently they're metabolized by our bodies. Eating glucose provides your body with energy that can be used to become a rage-fluencer, ride a jet ski, or water your tomato plants. But eating fructose actually causes your energy levels to go down at first. It lowers your cellular energy. We won't get into the details of phosphofructokinase versus fructokinase, how AMP deaminase is involved, and how much ATP is used to make more ATP from glucose. Suffice it to say that consuming a lot of fructose can cause the cellular energy units, which are called ATP, to drop by 40 to 50%. That drop in energy is a cellular emergency that triggers cells to reduce their metabolism and push any available calories into storage as fat or glycogen, rather than use them for writing your screenplay the way you would if your energy were plentiful. This energy drop also triggers hunger and thirst, so that you'll eat more to be able to store even more fat to keep you alive because you're in an energy crisis. Eating fructose is a great way to get your body to store fat. We do need some fat. It's what allowed our ancestors to stay alive long enough for us to eventually be born. Animals increase fructose consumption when their instincts tell them to, so that they have some extra fat just in time for hibernation season. But in humans who developed that particular alteration in how we metabolize fructose, the broken down product of ATP is converted to uric acid in the cell. This is important because the process that leads to the production of uric acid is also involved in the increase of body fat, development of insulin resistance, fatty liver, and elevations in blood pressure. Two paths diverged in a yellow wood, and going down one pathway, called the AMPK pathway, burns energy and fat and reduces insulin resistance. Going down the other pathway, called the AMPD pathway, stores energy and it is critical for inducing obesity, insulin resistance, and eventually diabetes. The switch that turns you toward the AMPD storage pathway is fructose. Fructose sequesters phosphate, thereby reducing metabolism, turning on the storage switch, and increasing levels of uric acid. This is why I, and lots of people who are way smarter than I am, think that gout incidence has more than doubled recently. Fructose increases uric acid. In fact, Rick Johnson has published studies showing that alcoholic drinks back in ye old days had a lot of sugar. So rich people who got gout were drinking a lot of sucrose with their alcohol and then getting gout. Something else I think is interesting to know is that women naturally just have lower uric acid levels than men. It's just the way it is. up until menopause. Then they become the same. Estrogen helps keep uric acid levels down. Okay, so fine. Apes went from Africa to Europe and back to Africa, and now eating fructose increases our uric acid levels. So what? Well, for one thing, living in a society where there's sucrose in almost everything for sure increases your risk for developing gout. And that's not great. But here's something they don't teach you in pharmacy or medical school, at least not in any that I know of. People with gout often have low-grade kidney disease, and people with high blood pressure often have kidney disease. Kidney insufficiency decreases your quality of life and ability to age at an elite level for a lot of reasons that we won't get into. But your kidneys and liver are your main filters, and maintaining their ability to function optimally will, for sure, improve your ability to function optimally. Love your liver and your kidneys. High uric acid levels lead to high blood pressure. And like we talked about just a couple of weeks ago in episode 158, a lifetime exposure to high blood pressure speeds up debility and death. Dr. Rick Johnson did experiments where he blocked uricase to raise the uric acid levels of rats, and their blood pressure reliably went up. Then he lowered their uric acid levels, and their blood pressure reliably went down. He looked in the kidneys for crystals of uric acid, like you'd find in someone's big toe joint, and there weren't any. Then he started putting soluble uric acid, so levels not high enough to crystallize, but uric acid in solution, onto cells, and saw that it caused cellular inflammation. And it was that inflammation that was leading to high blood pressure. But the body-wide inflammation from uric acid is worse than just high blood pressure, which is bad enough on its own. Inflammation ages you faster in thousands of different ways. Don't ask me what all those thousands of ways are, because I don't actually know. But I do know that a lot of the effects that increase the speed of aging and tissue breakdown are related to inflammation. Dr. Rick Johnson then did another rat experiment where he gave the little rodents fructose, and they developed high blood pressure. Then he gave them a drug called allopurinol, which blocks the formation of uric acid. It's prescribed all the time to people who have gout, and their blood pressure went back to normal. It was a huge discovery that nobody had ever made before, and I don't think people really know about or talk about, or if they do, they don't do anything about it today. So way to go, Dr. Rick Johnson. He also found that the fructose rats who developed high uric acid also got elevated triglycerides, insulin resistance, and fatty liver, in addition to their high blood pressure. And when he reduced their uric acid, all those things went away. I know way back in 2001 when I did my diabetes rotation, the diabetes educator pharmacist in the internal medicine clinic was like, oh yeah, you always see the patient's triglycerides levels go up before their A1C goes up to levels diagnostic for diabetes. A1C is like an indication of what your blood glucose levels have been for the past 3 months. Nobody was concerned about it or thought someone should inform these people that they could prevent the impending development of type 2 diabetes now, because we were seeing these precursor signs. I even heard doctors tell patients that their triglycerides were high when the patients asked what they could do about it. The doctors told them, oh, triglycerides are a type of fat. It's all fat, so maybe just eat less fat. That was the end of the whole discussion. It's so infuriating. Not all doctors are like that, thankfully, but I don't think it's all that uncommon. Doctors also know that high blood sugar, high triglycerides, high blood pressure, gout, fatty liver, and obesity all tend to show up together, but I don't think they realize that they can all be related to uric acid. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong, uric acid levels are never checked unless there are symptoms of gout. Forward-thinking medical providers who know that high uric acid levels can lead to high blood pressure and all of these other issues do check it, but I think it's pretty rare, which is a shame. 90 to 95% of cases of high blood pressure are termed, quote, essential hypertension, which means high blood pressure with no identifiable cause. So that's almost everyone. I've always been a little mystified by how traditional medicine doesn't seem to care about the cause of a lot of things. They just treat the symptoms and think that they've solved the problem. In the case of high blood pressure, there's a pervasive belief that salt raises your blood pressure. I've heard some people say that everyone with high blood pressure should go on a low sodium diet, and some people say that only some people are salt sensitive, so only those sensitive people should go on a low sodium diet. I remember my mom only using Morton light salt to sprinkle on food when I was a teenager. Rick Johnson's research shows that it's not total salt, like how many milligrams of sodium you get over the course of the day, that affects your blood pressure. It's the combination of salt and water. So if you offset your high sodium consumption by drinking a large amount of water to dilute the concentration of the salt, it won't raise your blood pressure. But eating a high sodium meal without much water will raise your blood pressure. Do you remember that Seinfeld episode where Kramer gets a line in a Woody Allen movie? These pretzels are making me thirsty. If you eat something salty and it makes you thirsty afterward, it's a sign that your serum sodium and probably blood pressure have already gone up. So here's the craziest thing I learned from Dr. Johnson. When you eat excess salt, your body starts manufacturing fructose. What? This is wild. High salt diets are associated with high blood pressure, but also the development of obesity and diabetes. And it could be because high salt diets cause your body to produce fructose. Then the fructose goes around doing all the detrimental things that fructose does in our bodies. So imagine the effects of a high salt meal that's washed down with a high fructose corn syrup sweetened beverage. So much fructose. Our bodies are so amazing at keeping us alive. Have you ever wondered if whales get thirsty? They don't have any fresh water to drink. As it turns out, tons of animals, including humans, can use the burning of body fat to make metabolic water that prevents dehydration. So it's theorized that the reason animals' bodies start manufacturing fructose when they consume a high sodium diet without the appropriate amount of water to dilute it is that fructose is a fat storage signal and fat helps preserve water. Crazy, right? I had never heard anything like this before. So you can offset some of the weight gain from a high salt diet by drinking a lot of water. And you can offset some of the weight gain and poor metabolic effects of fructose consumption by drinking a lot of water. I've heard all kinds of crazy things about drinking water. The most common one is that you should drink 1 ounce of water per pound of body weight that you are. So a 140-pound woman should drink 140 ounces of water a day. Then I heard that someone just made that up out of thin air, like getting 10,000 steps a day. Someone just made it up based on nothing. And I was always confused because when I was a kid, nobody carried water bottles around with them at all times. It's a weird and expensive obsession these days that didn't used to be a thing. And I was like, I'm pretty sure my Viking ancestors and my American pioneer ancestors didn't have 64-ounce double-wall vacuum-insulated 18/8 stainless water bottles with them at all times. So what gives? Well, those ancestors didn't eat anywhere near as much fructose or salt as we do now, so they weren't constantly battling sodium-induced dehydration or fructose overload in their kidneys. So it turns out that we really do need a lot of water these days, so keep chugging. The water is actually good for you and your metabolic health. There's tons of cool science behind why fructose can cause mitochondrial damage, pancreatic damage, insulin resistance, and diabetes. I won't bore you with it all, but fructose is uniquely powerful in its ability to cause elevated blood sugar, elevated blood pressure, elevated waist circumference, elevated triglycerides, fatty liver, and low HDL because of fructose's unique ability to drive up uric acid and also lactate. Fructose really can flip that fat storage switch. Dr. Johnson's book, The Fat Switch, will tell you all about it. I read it back in 2013 or so, I think, so I need to reread it. It's super interesting. Dr. Johnson has done tons of studies in rats showing that a low-calorie but high fructose diet causes rats to be able to maintain their weight with less calories than required to maintain their weight, and also develop high blood pressure, insulin resistance, fatty liver, and diabetes without obesity. A key driver of diabetes is that uric acid causes low-grade pancreatic islet cell inflammation. Just like uric acid can cause inflammation in the kidneys that can lead to kidney disease and high blood pressure. I think it's also important to know that it's the concentration of fructose in the liver that switches your metabolism to that mode that decreases your energy and causes fat storage. So the best way to flip that switch and damage your metabolism is to get a lot of fructose in a short amount of time. The best way to do that is to drink high fructose corn syrup, especially on an empty stomach because it's rapidly absorbed. The same number of milligrams of fructose that is drunk versus, say, eaten with a high protein meal will have very different effects in your body. So never, ever drink sugar. There's so much more to say about fructose, but we're here to talk about uric acid, so we won't start talking about how it's a miracle grow for cancer. I hope I've stayed on topic enough for you to see that uric acid is something that you should care about. It's really only tested for in people with symptoms of gout, but if your uric acid level is too high, it also causes kidney disease, high blood pressure, and insulin resistance. And I hope you know by now that if you want to live disease-free for a long time, the most important things you can do are to avoid liver disease, kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, cancer, chronic pain, and chronic inflammation, and to stay structurally strong. Uric acid plays a role in a whole bunch of those things, so by keeping yours in check, you'll decrease your odds of developing multiple longevity-killing conditions. How cool is that? It's most likely not something that's going to be checked for unless you ask for it or go to a very forward-thinking doctor. Since uric acid is cleared out by estrogen, there's a good chance that your uric acid level could go up around the time of menopause. So if you start having high blood pressure, decreased kidney function, or decreased sensitivity to insulin, it could be that your estrogen level is lower and therefore your uric acid level has gone up. A typical family practice doctor sees 20.6 patients per day. So if you come in with elevated blood pressure, she doesn't have time to think twice about prescribing you a blood pressure medication and sending you on your merry way. But there is so much that you can do as the patient not to accept that you have essential hypertension and try to figure out the cause. Absolutely take blood pressure medication if you need to, because your lifetime exposure to high blood pressure significantly reduces your lifespan. But you can check for high uric acid and insulin resistance and go after those things first. That might be all you need to do. Uric acid is pro-inflammatory, so if you have high uric acid causing high blood pressure and you take hydrochlorothiazide with lisinopril for your blood pressure, you'll still have chronic low-grade inflammation and increased chance of developing kidney insufficiency and insulin resistance. Don't let this happen to you. Most labs don't flag a uric acid level as high until it's over 7.5 because it's usually a test for gout. But if your level is over 5, you should be actively doing something to lower it. If it's over 6.5, you definitely want to be aggressively lowering it. There's a drug that lowers uric acid called allopurinol. It's cheap and easy. It has the possibility of serious side effects, but they're pretty rare in Caucasians and about 2% in African Americans and 3 to 4% in Asians. There's also another drug called Uric that can lower uric acid, but it's best to try to lower it by lifestyle if you can. Some people do all the healthy behaviors in the world and can't get it below 6. In my opinion, they're better off taking allopurinol than dealing with all the health-limiting consequences of living with high uric acid levels. The main obvious way to lower your uric acid is to cut out fructose from your life. No more high fructose corn syrup anything, no more sugary beverages of any kind, cut out high sugar foods of all kinds, and even reduce your consumption of mangoes, grapes, bananas, and melons if you need to. Eliminate packaged foods and non-water beverages, and you will be well on your way. Eliminating alcohol will also be helpful as it can raise uric acid. In case you're interested, the lowest fructose fruits are kiwis, lemons, limes, blueberries, and raspberries and strawberries. Like we talked about before, drinking water actually does help reduce your uric acid levels as well as your damage from fructose and the fructose you make when you eat salt. A few studies show that vitamin C can help reduce uric acid, so make sure you're getting enough. Some people recommend taking 50 milligrams of potassium citrate to help eliminate uric acid from your kidneys. You have to be careful with electrolytes like sodium and potassium if you already have any kidney problems though, so be careful. If you eat a lot of purine-rich foods like meat, balancing some of your meat protein with some collagen protein can help your body break down purines. One other thing that comes up are cherries and celery. I know there was a craze for a while there that drinking a glass of celery juice every day was more effective than blood pressure medication at lowering blood pressure. Maybe there was something to it, and its mechanism of action was that it lowered uric acid. Who knows? So, there you have it. Do you care about uric acid now? Can you see how knowing about it can help you put more years lived in good health into your future? Interestingly, in small amounts, uric acid is actually a beneficial antioxidant. It's only when you get too much that all of these bad things can start to happen. The biggest driver of high levels for most people is fructose, and you have a lot of control over how much fructose is running around your body. Thank you so much for learning about uric acid today. Get down on one knee and I will hereby dub thee smarter than most people and give you the title of Dame Foresight. Next week, we're going to talk about vaginal health and preventing vaginal atrophy and dryness. Until then, don't forget about uric acid, drink a lot of water, and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.